Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Triple N Media. This is COVID 19 World News, and this is November 5, 2020. Before we proceed any further, I'm excited to let you know that my book on COVID 19 pandemic 2019-2020 is available on Amazon.com. Check out this book and please leave your comments. Proceed with the feature presentation, the news update on COVID-19 on November 5th, 2020. As of November 5th, more than 48.6 million people across the globe have been infected with the coronavirus, accounting for 1.23 million deaths. The most interesting thing is 34.8 million people have already recovered from the coronavirus infection. If you look at the world population of 7.3 billion people, this is just a little more than 2% of the world population. That tells you how many more people could be susceptible to this infection in the coming weeks and months. There are close to 600,000 new cases recorded all across the world, accounting for almost 75 to 8,000 deaths resulting from the COVID-19 infection. The initial wave, which started in March and April, came down. Then we had a second wave, and now the world population is experiencing what looks like a third spike of the coronavirus pandemic. In the United States, here we have 9.8 million people who have been infected with the coronavirus, accounting for 239,947 deaths. No doubt, United States has the highest number of total deaths for any given country. However, that does not tell the entire story. As you can see, more than 6.2 million people have already recovered from the coronavirus infection. Let's look at some of the graphic representation, because you can go by numbers and you can also go by trends. They all serve different purposes. We looked at some of the numbers. Now let's look at the trend. This is the United States new cases and deaths. In March and April, we had the first wave, which gradually came down, but it never reached the bottom. Then during July, August, we had a sudden burst in a second wave, or a second spike, as you would want, as some people may want to call it, which resulted in 75,000 cases per day, which was 3 times the number of cases we had in March and April. Now we are approaching over 100,000 new cases per day here in the United States, which is 4 times the number of cases we had when we had an entire lockdown of the country. This tells you a lot of important information. Lockdowns do help to reduce the spread of the virus, reduce the incidence of COVID-19 infections. It also reduces the mortality. But the nature of the virus pandemic is such that it comes in waves. The Spanish pandemic had 3 waves: the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. Similarly, we are experiencing the first wave here, and we are experiencing a second spike. I don't know if we are sure this is the second wave, but we are already seeing a third spike here in the United States. And we're going to compare this to other European countries and see how it differs. One important thing I want you to pay attention is the number of new cases versus the mortality. In every instance, in every country, you are going to see this picture. And I have talked about this in my previous video about what I call COVID-19 pandemic or Casdemic. and I'll explain that briefly in a minute. When we had 25,000 new cases per day, we had a mortality of almost 2,500. We are having 4 times the number of cases, and still the mortality is almost half of what we experienced in March and April. As the number of cases are going up exponentially, the number of deaths have remained stable or they have come down compared to the March and April death rates. This is not only here in the United States, we see similar pictures in other parts of Europe. Now, let's focus our attention for a moment towards India. India, with a population of 1.3 billion people, has 8.4 million cases diagnosed with COVID-19 infection, resulting in 125,000 deaths. But if you look at the map here, even though Indian COVID cases started coming towards the end of March and the beginning of April, it is still going through the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the peak during September 2nd week, India had close to 100,000 cases per day. It is gradually coming down, but still India is experiencing 50,000 new cases per day. Even though India has a very low mortality, but nonetheless, we want to underscore the point that different countries are different phases of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the United States and in many states within the United States, we see the first wave, the second wave, and perhaps the third wave or the spike, whatever you want to call it, whereas most of Europe is going through the second wave or the spike, whereas in India, we are still seeing the first wave, and a similar picture is also seen in Brazil. Here is a chart showing new cases in France and new deaths. Just comparing to the United States graph, in the early stages during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, they had cases like 300-400 per day, and their mortality was maximum 1,500 cases during the peak. This should be like almost 5,000 cases. But now look at what's happening during the second wave. The number of new cases in France is surpassing 40,000 new cases per day, 5 to 8 times higher than what it was during the first wave of the pandemic in March and April. But look at the mortality here. Just as we saw in the United States, it is much more evident here, even though they had a much higher mortality during the first wave. During the second wave, even though they are having number of cases which are 4 to 6 times or 8 times bigger than what they saw in March and April, the mortality numbers are smaller compared to what they had in April and May. All right, let's look at here. United Kingdom. United Kingdom is having a real rough time with the number of cases and also the number of people infected. As we can see, this is during the first wave where they had like 5,000 cases. Now they are having 20 to 25,000 cases. That is 4 to 5 times bigger than what they had during March and April in terms of new cases. But look at the mortality. They had at the peak, they had maybe 1,100 cases per day. But now with 5 times increasing number of cases, still the mortality is no more than 500. So there is a clear dichotomy between the sudden rise, exponential rise in the number of cases compared to the mortality during this second wave. The same story we see in Italy, and a similar story is repeated in Germany. And this is what has been termed as Casdemic. We are finding a lot of cases, but the mortality has gradually gone down, or maybe it has a slight uptick in the last, I would say, 2 weeks. And look at Germany, they had 5,000 cases. Now it is 4 times more than what they had in March and April. Germany has one of the best healthcare systems, one of the best tracking systems, one of the best self-containing procedures, but still you cannot beat a virus gone viral. Here's an interesting chart that I created. I want you to pay attention to some of these numbers. Yes, there are a lot of numbers, but once I start explaining this, it will make a lot of sense. In the United States, the media is driven more by numbers, maybe because of the election time. United States, in the last couple of days, we have hit 100 new cases per day. But there are a lot of other countries in Europe which are experiencing similar increases in cases, or maybe larger. Let me explain what I mean by that. In United States, the population is 331 million. We had 100,000 new cases. That is 302 new cases per million population. But look at UK with a population of 68, they had close to 25,000 cases. Their case rate for a million population is 366, and their case rate is 121,000 if they had a population comparable to the United States. Similarly, France, 3 times the number of cases, 295,000 cases, while United States we have 100,000 cases if the population in these countries were equal. Similarly, Italy has twice the number of cases compared to the United States. And look at Belgium, 4 times more cases compared to the United States based on population. With the exception of Germany, which has a lower number compared to the United States, the rest of Europe is seeing more cases per million population, but that's not solving any problem. So let's look at how we can find some solution, find the reasons and some solutions. One of the interesting things that was reported in the BBC was the mutation of the virus. It is common occurrence. The virus starts off in one location. As it moves to different parts of the world, the virus mutates. It may be because of a different host, it transforms into a different genetic makeup. This may be a part of its struggle to survive. As a result, somewhere by the time the virus reached Italy, it had mutated, and the name given to that mutation is D614G, which has a change in the amino acid sequence in its spike protein, which makes this virus more infectious, which can readily spread from people to people, and it accounts for 97% of the samples collected from around the world. That might explain some of the reason why we are seeing a much faster and wider spread of the coronavirus in the last several weeks. To add to that, we know the coronavirus can be airborne. That means if you're around people who have the virus, and 35 to 40% of them may be asymptomatic and may not even know they're carrying the virus, then you are going to be exposed to the virus. Now think about the holiday season coming up. You family members get together. We have holiday gatherings. House transmission can become an important source of spreading the virus within the family members, within the family circles. Because when we have a family gathering, it is not very common for us to be wearing masks while we are sitting down for dinner or for a conversation. As a result, if you have a gathering of 20 people, if one person who is asymptomatic has the virus and is capable of spreading the virus, you can guess how many people are going to be exposed to that virus and how many people could possibly get infected. So this is an important thing to keep in mind, because as we go through the holiday season, there could be a sudden rise in the number of cases within the family circles. How are we going to deal with this? Are lockdowns an answer to this problem? Well, we know lockdowns work during the first phase of the coronavirus pandemic. We do not have too many options. We have already used self-mitigation guidelines like using the mask at workplaces, at shopping centers, and maintaining distance, washing hands. We're already doing that. What else can be done? Many countries like Germany, United Kingdom, Italy, France, United States, Belgium, Poland, and many other countries in Europe and many states within the United States have been forced to have what are called localized lockdowns. That is, if you find a particular city or an area with a very high incidence of COVID-19 infection, then you reduce the movement of people, you reduce the spread of virus, and hope the virus will slow down. What is our final hope? A vaccine. Of course, there are 6 vaccines that are currently in phase 3 trial in different parts of the world, and Oxford COVID-19 vaccine just recently announced that they may be able to bring their results sometime during the next month, that is in December. They are hopeful that a vaccine may be available in late December or early 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I want to let you know my book on COVID-19 pandemic, an international and a personal guide, is available on Amazon.com. Take a look at it and please leave your comments. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. And this has been a COVID-19 World News, November 5th, 2020. And I am Dr. Nik Nikam from Houston, Texas.